Hey, you're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and I'm happy to be here today with my brilliant co-host, Ivan. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and today's guest?
Hi. Well, you kind of did that already. So I'm Ivan, and we have Jamie Moodie today. Jamie is the owner and managing director of Vetsdirect, which is also known as VetPhone, and it is the largest UK veterinary telehealth provider, as well as has presence in overseas. He's also a director of an investment fund, and we're happy to have you here, Jamie.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, Jamie, it's really interesting to be connecting on the podcast. I guess the last time and the first time we met each other was at the North American Veterinary Conference called VMX now. Still remember that. We had a great dinner there with Randy from LifeLearn and all kinds of really interesting kind of conversations over dinner. That was probably over a year ago now. Pretty amazing how quick time goes by.
Yeah, it was. I only wish this podcast could be over a steak as well.
Yeah, totally. And it's been really fun. We've been, I think we're on the 7th episode of the podcast now. So really excited to have you join us. One of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the show is, so far all of our guests have been North American based, either companies or CEOs or even veterinarians that have been doing interesting things. But we thought we might take a little bit of a more international turn with our podcast and get some perspective from over across the water. I always say that in Halifax, we're the closest city to the other Halifax, which is over in the UK, and we're a direct flight over there. So it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Jamie, can you tell us a little bit more about what Vetsdirect Limited does and who your customers are and what problems you solve?
Of course, very happy to. So in a nutshell, Vetsdirect is a telehealth platform, and it provides triage, support and advice to pet owners throughout the world using a team of home-working vet nurses and veterinarians. So we deal with all sorts of questions from pet owners, from, my dog's being sick, what do I do, to, dogs barking strangely, is this a behavioral problem? We field all sorts of questions from pet owners. We're 24/7. And our main routes to market are through insurance customers and charities. So in the UK, we work with the likes of Tesco and Mordan. And in North America, we work with Pets Plus Us at the moment, with a few more in the pipeline. Charity-wise, we work with some of the bigger charities in the UK. And we're also starting to work with veterinary practices, which is, I think, a really interesting angle, because I think that is where telemedicine is going to go in the future.
That's excellent. Very interesting. I have tons of questions about telemedicine, telehealth, very hot topic. But just before we get there, how did you get into the veterinary field, and what inspired you to start in our domain and led to specifically to the VetPhone and the Vetsdirect?
It's a really interesting question. I'll give you a brief potted history because I don't want anyone to fall asleep. But I actually started out as an accountant. Don't throw anything. And we'll gloss over that. Then I moved into private equity, which I found really, really interesting. So basically my remit there was to invest in small to medium companies, mainly in the UK. And I got to see in a very short period of time, 400 odd different business models, meet 400 odd successful teams, quickly learned how to recognize a great business and a great model. But I always wanted to run my own thing and roll the sleeves up. And so I left that job, raised some money, and started to look for industries that really interested me. And I suppose that's what brought me to Vetsdirect. Vet industry has always interested me on both a personal and a professional level. Firstly, I love animals. And I think if I could have my time again, I'd probably retrain as a veterinarian. But from a professional perspective, I just felt the industry was ripe for disruption. You could see it happening in human health. You could see it happening in vast ways of other industries. And I always thought that at the time, the veterinary industry was a little bit behind, and it's really good to see that it's really fast catching up now. And at that point, I stumbled across Vetsdirect and immediately fell in love with it. I suppose it was a business that satisfied all stakeholders. For example, veterinarians and nurses could work flexibly from home. Pet owners could get convenient and trusted advice and maybe cost savings on occasion. Business customers got an improved value perception, and actually we helped veterinary practices because we took away some of the straightforward cases that could be solved remotely and allowed them time to focus on the more complex issues in practice. So that's sort of how I got to Vetsdirect.
That's fantastic. I think that the interesting questions about telehealth and telemedicine is always sort of on the legal side of things. How do you guys deal in the UK, and how does it work for you across the borders into other countries in terms of regulations in different jurisdictions and the distinction between the telehealth and telemedicine? And I'm also going to load it on top with how do you control and differentiate prescribing, diagnosing, or advising to see a veterinarian over the phone? Because those are sort of the hot topics of the area.
Okay, quite a few questions in there, Ivan. So hang on, let me pick them off. If I forget anything, remind me, please. But I suppose the first thing to point out is Vetsdirect's been going for, God, almost 16 years now. So we're dealing with 100,000 consultations a year. And our focus, our entire focus has always been on safety and consistency. So in over 1 million consultations since inception, we've never given advice that led to the death of an animal. And the reason for that is we're incredibly rigorous with how we give advice. Everything follows a sort of what we call a clinical protocol. And those clinical protocols, to answer your first question, avoid us falling into any legal issues. Because in my view, telehealth is triage and advice, and that is legal regardless of where you are in the world. And telemedicine is diagnosis and prescription, and those elements are highly regulated. So how we avoid falling foul of any regulation is we don't cross into diagnosis and prescription.
Okay.
And that also answers your second question around cross-border. Because we're not straying into diagnosis and prescription, we therefore don't have the cross-border issues.
So you have the professionals in the industry, the veterinarians and the nurses. By the way, for the North American listeners, nurses and technicians are the same. You hire those licensed or previously licensed professionals so you get the professional advice, but then they're giving the advice to the degree where it's advisory, not prescriptive or diagnosing anything. Is that, do I understand correctly?
That is exactly it. So generally at the end of a call, you're going to have one of 4 outcomes from our team on that triage basis. It's, this is a minor issue. Here's some advice to deal with it at home. So that's point 1. Outcome 2 for the situation, and we'll call you back in a couple of hours. So it's a callback. Option 3 is you do need treatment here, but we would like you to go and see your vet during normal working hours. So if it's 2 a.m. in the morning, don't rush to the emergency provider. Just go back to your practice the next day. And then the final one is, no, this is really serious. You need to seek physical treatment as soon as possible. And by keeping to those 4 outcomes, we make sure that the pet and the pet owner do the right thing on every occasion.
That's fantastic. On this side of the actual technology, so it sounds like you started with the phone, and currently there's a lot of telemedicine platforms that erupted, and I don't know where's the place for those and whether they are, there's different models. People are trying to connect the owner with the vet clinic. I don't know if there's already a third party that do just what you do, where they engage veterinarians and nurses to do the telemedicine. So can you speak a little bit about that development and how that competes with your model?
And can I just append to that and say also, who are your competitors and why are you better than them?
Well, okay, so I'll start with that question, John. Who are our competitors? So the biggest one in the US is Whisker Docs, and the one in the UK is Paw Squad. Why do I think we're better than them? I suppose the first point is our focus is entirely on, as I said before, quality and consistency. Every bit of advice we give is clinical protocol backed, it's reviewed, we've got an incredibly robust monitoring system. So I would say the consistency and quality of our advice is superior. I don't think many people can match our monitoring regime. So that's point 1. We've been doing it a number of years, 16 years to be exact. And that means that we bring a lot of experience to the table, and we've made mistakes along the way, but we've corrected them. And so we're constantly improving. And I think the final thing is our view, Vetsdirect's view, is that telemedicine and telehealth providers should work in conjunction with veterinary practices. And so I think what you'll see is you'll see a lot of changes in the next few years. And Ivan, actually, this lends more towards your point around you've got some people popping up and providing it as a third party, so it's direct to the pet owner and the veterinary practice doesn't get a look in. You've got some people acting just merely a tech platform so that veterinary practices can do it themselves. And I think, you're going to see a huge number of those sort of platforms rising up in the next couple of years and then probably folding in due course while the industry works out what it's really aiming for. I think from my perspective, telehealth and telemedicine should be used to augment physical treatment. So I don't think it should be competitive to veterinary practices. Where I see the future of telehealth and telemedicine is acting as a digital front door to veterinary practices. And I think that's where our system is somewhat unique. We have a system that allows veterinary practices to use our system, but if they don't have the team to field those consultations, at that point, we can use our highly scalable team to help fulfill those consultations on their behalf. So the pet owners always come to the practice, but we just help them service their customers.
Very interesting. And I guess the question then on the back of that is, what does the business model look like? So it sounds like you're a pretty significant lead generation for the veterinarians, and that's how it works in conjunction with them. And I know that in UK, the insurance industry is quite evolved, not as much in North America. So is this the model where you're collaborating with the insurance companies? And how does the whole equation work? Who is the core customer? I mean, it is pets and pet owners, but how does the whole system actually turning to business?
It's a really good question. Again, I think this is one that we'll see change over the next couple of years. But our core route to market is through business customers. So in the UK, as an example, the vast majority of our customers are insurers or charities. So as part of your insurance policy, you get access to our service for free. So as you say, the end customer is always the pet owner, but it's the insurance customer that pays for it because it differentiates their proposition. You know, if animals don't need to go to an emergency provider out of hours, then they don't, and that saves them a bit of cash. Pet owner wins because they've got convenient and trusted advice. And I suppose we benefit because we're 24/7. We can help all of those people. Where I think it will change is the insurance industry is starting to recognize that it needs to work in conjunction with the veterinary industry. And so I suppose what we might see in the next few years is us continuing to work with insurers, but also starting to work with veterinary practices as well. So it doesn't matter where you're calling from, whether you're insured or not insured, I'm always diverting where necessary you back to your own veterinary practice. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes it very interesting because I kind of probed in that direction, but I think that's more of a future look as I'm hearing it. Because right now, if it's insurance that is advising, and I can see why, they're trying to save the cost on the actual visits, they're advising to get the consultancy with you. So that's sort of a sweet spot there. But I think that you're absolutely right. For the veterinarians, this is a lead generation, and then you're a precursor that actually directs the right client into the door. I heard in interesting statistics, I think it was collected in the UK, that every pet owner has at least 2 reasons to contact a veterinarian per month throughout the pet's life, but they don't because of the friction into visiting a veterinarian with 2 points, inconvenience as well as the cost. So I think that your product and your organization actually filling that need where they can address the questions that are maybe not of a serious need to actually go to the veterinarian, and everybody wins. And veterinarians are much rather to get an appointment that has a serious condition rather than to come in, charge them for appointment, and then say, yeah, everything is fine, you don't have to be here. You know, my experience in the industry is in the emergency hospital, and you've seen many people that come in, you know, after hours, it's 10, p.m., midnight, and they come in, pay, $150 for a visit, and you just say, yep, everything's fine, just go home. And they get really frustrated, and that discourages them for the next time. So I think what you're doing is exceptional.
Ivan, actually, I really agree with you there. I think I caveat it further. I think pet owners are absolutely delighted, and insurers too, they're absolutely delighted to pay the cost of treatment when it's necessary. I think, as you say, the friction is paying for something they don't need, and also veterinarians don't like selling something that people don't need. So I think what we're trying to do is work with practices, work with industry to lower the entry cost of veterinary care.
In my last tech startup, we had a bunch of young people start with us, and I had said to one of them, I said, yeah, we're a pretty traditional business. We go to the office from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock every day, and we work together. And knowing both of you and knowing both of you, Ivan, knowing your previous business quite well, SmartFlow, and Jamie, knowing how you work as a team, I'd like to talk about remote work. It's really interesting. I think it's an innovative new approach. It doesn't necessarily fit into every veterinary practice, although we had Frank on a couple of episodes ago, and he has a veterinary clinic and he had a receptionist that he just wouldn't let go, and she moved thousands of miles away and is still their receptionist. So let's talk a little bit about remote work, the challenges, how it's worked for you, and just any insight that you have. And then, Ivan, I know for sure you're going to double back on this and have something to add, and I'm just going to sit back and listen, boys. Go ahead.
Ivan, do you mind if I pitch in first?
Absolutely. And I highly doubt that he will just sit back and listen.
Well, we'll wait and see, won't we? You almost knocked the nail on the head there, Shawn. You build a relationship with your team, and sometimes circumstances get in the way. You know, people have lives outside of work, and actually they get dragged away, or they can't work the same hours anymore, or they need a bit of support because they've got a physical ailment. And actually, I think the beauty of remote working is you can retain your team through using technology and home working. So as a concept, I absolutely love it. I think it's not without its challenges. I think, culture and feeling part of a team, that is something you need to work at really, really hard, because it's not like you can just wander over to their desk, give them a pat on the back and go, you're doing a great job. This is fantastic. I think, regular communication, team events, all those sorts of things have to be focused on if you want to retain your culture as a remote working organization.
That's very interesting. So as Shawn mentioned, we build a 65 people team. I don't know how many on your, and it was 100% remote. We never had an office, never, since inception to exit. The culture is one of those things when you go beyond sort of 25, 30 people, you really need to instill that. And that's the glue that will keep you together. Also, technology helps a lot to basically have those social channels and communication. We use something like Slack to have not just the business-related exchanges, but the personal events, just joking around and things like that. But the direction where I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit more about, right now, the big problem that we see in the veterinary industry is shortage of veterinarians. We definitely don't have shortage of pets and the customers. The shortage of veterinarians is a big concern. So I think that, again, what you're doing is kind of serving the need of qualifying the customer that comes in to actually use our professional time to help them. But also the problem is coming from, as people coin these people, millennials, and I think I kind of qualify at the end of it. And it's really about how people consume information and how impatient they are in their careers. And I'm very concerned about veterinary career because we spent, 8 to 12 years if you're specialized in becoming a veterinarian. And most of my classmates burned out after 10 years of working. And I think it's in inability to construct your own lifestyle. So that's sort of a long premise to a question. If I am a veterinarian and I'm thinking to change, which there's a lot of those vets, and I think that you have a big pool of veterinarians that could join your team, how would I see my day? How does the work look like? As a veterinarian, can I construct my work-life balance by working through sort of over the phone and then regulate my schedule because it's a 24/7 service? And what sort of feedback you're getting from your professional staff?
Yep, happy to field that one. I suppose, the key answer to have we got it right is in the data. We've got a full rota at the moment. We don't need any more people, but we are growing, so we'll be recruiting in due course. But without any advertising whatsoever, we're getting 50 to 60 unsolicited CVs every month. People want to do this. And I think part of the reason for that is it is that flexibility point. It's that ability to construct a healthy work-life balance, I think. So, for example, what does an average day look like at Vetsdirect? It's very much dependent on your seniority and, the times that you're available to work. But, we've got some people that work, almost like a 9 to 5. They do 40 hours a week. We've got some that do 10 hours a week that they only want to do it in the evenings on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday. So how we tend to do it is pick the hours that you want, provided it also works for us. You're going to have to give us 1 or 2 hours, which might not be the most pleasant. So, at night or a couple of hours on the weekend, but we keep that ratio very low so that people can have a work-life balance. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings an interesting thought that I had. There's another startup that we want to interview here, but they're building a platform that connects the locum veterinarian to the providers. And it's interesting. That might be an interesting pool for your organization to dip into these clinicians that don't have to really quit what they're doing, but maybe they're doing some in-person appointments and working a couple of days a week. And maybe they can be those sort of on call or on schedule, but work from home as well. So that really opens up a separate niche and different direction for veterinarians, which I love, because this is something that's happening. As you can tell, I'm doing a podcast, not doing a surgery at the moment, just because of that. I got burned out with the emergency and then stepped into technology. And I think that finding the path and considering the biggest issue in our industry, the suicide rate that is, we surpass dentists, giving a different direction to veterinarians. I think that's a very interesting mission to accomplish, and to show them how else you can utilize your knowledge without burning out or, God forbid, going into the direction of a suicide.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, wouldn't it be great that we didn't have so many veterinarians after all that hard work leaving the industry and actually felt they had enough diversity and time in their job to really enjoy it? That's why I'm so keen for telehealth and telemedicine to work in partnership with the industry. So, okay, next week you're hands-on in practice, but the week after you're doing remote consulting for us. Give them that flexibility, give them that work-life balance. I think it's absolutely key for the future of the industry.
Yeah. For example, from somewhere from the forest in your motorhome, like Shawn is doing this podcast today. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
You forgot to mention that I'm also under a blanket, Ivan.
Okay, well, I thought that would be too much detail for the listeners, but yes, from under the blanket, and I saw an image. So,
and a little bit of context: the reason why I'm under a blanket is to dampen the noise, not for any other unforeseen reasons.
Oh, they were foreseen. We just didn't want to mention
under a blanket.
So I went to a podcast camp and found out that if you want to have high quality audio, you've got to get rid of the ambient sound around you, and that's how you do it. So Ivan's got a much more professional setup. He's got sound dampening panels on the roof of his office, so he's all set. But I'm in a motorhome in the middle of the forest. You got to do what you got to do to record a podcast when you're off away from the office.
I told you should get along with your wife not to get in this situation.
Oh my. It's pretty fun. It's all true. I think you did tell me that last weekend, actually. Yeah. One of the things that I can't help but want to ask, and it kind of builds on our conversation that we had in Florida, Jamie, is where are you at with your technology stack? What tools are you using? How did the rebuild of your platform go? And what's new technology-wise? And how does all the tech work together? How do you make it so that you can be efficient and listen to the number of patients or cases that you do every day?
I think the first thing is picking highly reliable providers. So telephony provider, if telephone's where you want to go, or a decent live chat hub. So from our perspective, actually the technology is quite simple, Shawn. It's in the Microsoft tech stack. Really, what we need every single time we have a consultation is one, can the person get in touch with us? So it's phone, live chat, or it's video. And those, we use third parties for all of those. And also to use those clinical protocols I was talking about previously. So we've automated them and they stand alone and they're in the .NET framework. Other than that, really, there's not too much tech around it. I think where I really want to take it is sort of down the mobile app route. I think to turn a reactive conversation, my pet's ill, to a proactive conversation. You've not had your vaccination this month. Do you want to go on and sort that? I think that is where tech could really help us.
It's really cool, Jamie. Really interesting to know. And then, another question that comes to my mind is, you're the director of this investment fund. Are you investing in other veterinary technology startups? And what's interesting to you from an investment perspective?
The answer is I'm always looking for the next investment. So very happy to sort of look at startups or, businesses that are already going at the moment. I suppose what interests me is I think there's a couple of challenges that we need to fix in the industry before telemedicine and actually the industry in general can really advance, and that is data flow. I think, the quality of data within PMS systems, I think the quality of data sharing between, say, my organization and veterinary practice and being able to integrate into PMS systems, I think that is absolutely key. So I'm quite interested in anyone that can crack that nut.
It's interesting that you brought that up. Ivan, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, that's sort of exactly what I was thinking after I left SmartFlow within the IDEX infrastructure. The one thing that I noticed throughout technology and large companies is that there's a lot of good applications, but none of them connect. And then when you're trying to articulate your vision on your product to a veterinarian, then it all makes good sense and you can make a sale. But then when you get to actual integration, then it doesn't work the way they expect it. So I think that the challenge on the market and in the industry right now is availability of a common channels or APIs where you can plug everything in so it delivers one unified solution across the entire portfolio. And that's, I think, that sort of the direction that you're going with. That is the problem.
Yeah. How do you fix it though, Ivan?
I think it's time to fix it. Yeah.
Tell us your business idea, Ivan.
Well, but that's sort of what it is. I think that that's what needs to happen, and someone needs to harness the startups and the connectivity, and it has to start from. See, the challenge that I see is that large companies have ability to acquire products, and they buy them, and then they add them to a stack, but they don't integrate them well. And then also, you can't have all the solutions. And then they become a very proprietary network and a closed system where they can't connect anything else. And then the whole degree of monetization that they're trying, I think that the business model doesn't work that well either. So I think that overall, the solution to that is someone stepping up and building in sort of an open source bus where everything can plug into.
It's really interesting because, people look at technology as a competitive advantage. It's the old way of looking at software. It's like, let's build it for ourselves. Let's make it a closed loop, and then let's buy other things and add it to it. Where, if you look at other industries, you look at companies like Google and how they open source the majority of their code and let other people build on top of it. It's a different world. And Jamie, it goes back to what you were saying about the veterinary industry before. It definitely is a little bit behind other industries that we all know. And there's definitely room for catch up. And I think there's much more room for more openness and sharing and things like open source software and open source data. I think it will change veterinary medicine for the better. But I think a lot of the large companies and even the small ones are scared of that. I think everybody's still thinking of the limited pie as opposed to there's enough for everyone.
Yeah, I think it would solve so many problems. I mean, just, for example, making it slightly more personal, when one of my customers calls, I want them to be able to recognize the number. Oh, that's this person. Here's the medical record for their pet owner so we can give better advice. Whatever we say, you need to go and see the vet, that's automatically pinged to the veterinary practice because, as you say, it's got an API link. The data is better. We can provide better decisions, and also we can sort of provide the pet owner with what they need. I just think it's absolutely critical.
Absolutely. I think that that's well overdue. There's also an evolutionary process, and I think that, several applications that are heading in that direction. Covetrus took a stab at it. IDEX did as well with the vet data and data point projects. But I think we're about to see some of these more significant models erupt where things will start connecting. There's a significant need. We know that it's there, and it's just a matter of people gathering around the initiative and executing on it.
Ivan and me both had exits last year in our companies. And so we took up this podcast, to give ourselves something to do. And it's been so amazing to have conversations like this and to see how aligned people are from different areas of the world. To hear you talk about that, Jamie, and to know all of the conversations that I've had with Ivan, we're both looking for the next thing. And it's really interesting to hear you both have a similar idea, and no one's doing this right now. And I think that there's a massive opportunity for data sharing for sure.
Well, if you find the right solution, I'll back it.